Hi, social studies students. So today we are going to go over some tips and tricks on how to write a position paper or assignment 2 in social studies. So this type of assignment you are going to see on your grade 12 diploma, so it's important that we get comfortable with it. So what is it? So basically it is an essay where you will need to present an arguable opinion on the issue and convince the reader that your position is the right one by providing evidence in an organized manner. So if you're in grade 10, you will be addressing the perspective of globalization, in grade 10 nationalism, and in grade 12 ideology. So what do you need to do? So basically, you're going to be given a source and you need to take a side of the issue. So do you agree or disagree with the source provided? You need to persuade your reader that you have defensible knowledge of the topic. You need to persuade them that you're right by using evidence. And you need to make sure you address counter arguments because you need to show that your argument is the best and the right one. So now that we know what it is, what does it look like? So this is an example taken from a diploma exam. So first you will see a source, and this is the perspective that you are going to have to write on. And then next you're going to see the question. This question says, to what extent should we embrace the ideological perspective reflected in the source? And here's a closer look at that question. And you can see that in each of the bullets, it tells you what it expects you to do. Of course, since this is taken from a diploma, it's embracing ideology. In grade 10, it's going to be globalization, and grade 11, nationalism again. So now that we went through what it is and what it looks like, let's go through the steps on how to write a successful position paper. So step one is you need to find the perspective of the source. Here we can see that it is individuals are by nature unique and unequal. Efforts by the state to interfere with the lives of individuals will result in a restrictive and inefficient society. So here's what you need to do. First, you need to go over the explicit meaning. So what does it say? What do you see in that source? Next, you need to go over the implicit meaning, which is what's hidden in there. What is the author trying to tell you? Then you need to explain the message of the source, connect to ideology presented in the source, then relate it back to concepts that you have learned. So relate it back to that evidence. So that includes key vocabulary, concepts of ideologies, and supporters of the source. So what politicians, philosophers, leaders, countries would agree with this source. Step two, after you do all that planning, is you need to create your position regarding the source and the ideas of globalization, grade 12, nationalism, grade 11, and ideology, grade 12. The most important thing is you need to agree or disagree with the source and tell me why. After that, you need to make sure you have arguments that are able to support your position. So if you don't have arguments for your position, you might need to rethink that, because your position statement is the fundamental argument, and all other arguments have to connect back and prove that position. So an example of a position statement is the government that best supports the interests of everyone is a government that applies aspects from both sides of the political spectrum and a moderate stance on the ideological perspective in the source. So that's an example of a good position. It wants you to take both sides, and then you're going to relate all your arguments back to that position. So how do you analyze an issue from your source if you don't know how? So again, determine what the source is saying. Then you want to choose an opinion on which side of the argument you want to take. Again, make sure you have evidence for that position, because if you don't, you're not going to have a very persuasive position paper. Tip, make a pro-con list, and the pro list, if your pro list has more, you know you have a good position. Step three is find evidence. Evidence is key to social studies. If you don't have evidence, your argument is lacking. You need to support your position, and evidence demonstrates knowledge of content and proof of learning, and that's what you need to do on your exam. You can study for position papers by just knowing your evidence. So go over those 4 related issues and know the key points. So what does supporting evidence include? So there's factual knowledge, so information that is verifiable and agreed upon by almost everyone. Statistical inferences, so interpretations and examples of an accumulation of facts, informed opinion, so opinion developed through research and or expertise of the claim, and personal testimony, so personal experience of the claim related by a knowledgeable party. So an example of evidence for this source is that you could talk about how this source embraces classical liberal philosophy of laissez-faire economic self-interests and individual rights and freedoms. And then you can talk about Adam Smith, John Locke, those classic liberal philosophers, and how they supported classic liberal and individualism. So now that we went through how to plan, let's go through some formats. So the first one is embracing the source. So here's your introduction. Your first sentence is going to tell me whether you embrace the source. Then you're going to tell me some background information about the source and introduce what you're writing about, acknowledge the other side, and have a clear and obvious position that embraces the source that we talked about. Now, format 1 continued is paragraph 2 and 3, so we're getting into your body paragraphs. These ones look the same. So state one main reason why this source is so good. For example, this is embracing liberalism, so you can discuss economic benefits. Then use evidence and refer back to the source. Paragraph 3 is formatted the same, but instead of economic benefits, let's talk about political and social benefits. Again, use examples, refer back to the source and your position. Okay, now for your last body paragraph, or paragraph number 4, you have a couple options of what you need to do. So option 1 is you need to go over what would happen if we didn't have this viewpoint in the source. So, for example, without modern liberalism, there could be a dictatorship. Then you need to connect to evidence and refer back to the source. Now, option 2 is you need to explain some problems with the viewpoint in the source. So, for example, in modern liberalism, there are some economic gaps. And again, connect to evidence and refer back to the source. Now, let's take a look at option 2, which is where you are rejecting the source. So the introduction looks the same. So the ideological perspective of the source is rejected. So connect to globalization, nationalism, and those different isms in the ideologies. Go through background information and introduce your topics, acknowledge the other side, and state your position that rejects the source. So paragraph number 2 and 3, so your body paragraphs, look the same. Instead, if you're rejecting the source, you're going to talk about why the source is so bad. So, for example, if it's a dictatorship, you could talk about Stalin or economic downfalls. In paragraph 3 there, my example is you could talk about Hitler or political and social downfalls. Again, remember to connect to evidence and relate back to the source in your position. Now, paragraph 4 is a little different. So what is the better alternative if you reject the source? So if you are talking about dictatorships, you could talk about modern liberalism and how that is a better way to run a country. Again, use people, countries, events, contemporary and historical evidence, and relate back to the source. Your concluding paragraph is the same for everyone. And if you are running out of time, this one can be done quickly. So again, restate your position. This should be one sentence. Don't restate it exactly the same though, change some wording. Summarize each of your body paragraphs into one sentence. So that's a total of 3 sentences. Don't introduce any new material, and do a closing statement about your essay in general. Okay, some tips when writing. No personal words. That means you cannot use words like I, me, mine, you, we, are. So do not, I think that the issue is presented, but do state that the issue presented. No rhetorical questions. So do not say something like, is it true that the issue presented is? Do something like this. It is true that the issue presented is correct. Also, don't ask the reader their opinion, because it's your job to persuade them that your opinion is the best opinion. Okay, so here is your rubric. You can find it on the course homepage. Make sure you familiarize yourself with it. If you have any questions about how to write a position paper, please contact me. You can call me at 780-864-1615 or email me at heatherdensworth@pwsd76.ab.ca. I hope that this video helped you, and I am looking forward to all your fantastic position papers. Have a great day.